Get down! Good morning. Here we are, Niagara on the lake. There's
Top
time.
of the morning to ya.
Top of the morning.
I can't say what I want to say.
We're here at Fort George. This fort was here during the War of 1812 when Major General Isaac Brock, which you will hear about later on, his 49th of Foot Regiment was in this fort during the War of 1812. It's a cool place. It got burned to the ground by the Americans over at Fort Niagara. That was in the last video. They shot cannon fire right over the Niagara River and totally burned down Fort George. So all the buildings here, except for the old stone building that held all the gunpowder and everything, that building is the only original remaining building here. But they built the fort back up to the way it was in 1812. So let's go inside. Here we are inside Fort George. This building here is what housed all the soldiers, the 49th Regiment of Foot during the War of 1812, and militiamen as well. But this building here, we're going to go in first. Oh, hey, Tam. Jesus.
Oh, hey, Stan.
Allergies. Alright. Cool little building. Okay, this here is called a bastion. This is Brock's bastion. This is where they put cannons through these holes to protect the fort from any intrusion from the outside. But what's significant about this one is where Major General Isaac Brock and his aide-de-camp, Lieutenant Colonel John McDonnell, were buried after they were killed during the War of 1812 at Queenston Heights. You will learn more about that later in the upcoming video. But here, our famous Tam is going to explain exactly what this is.
So, this is Brock's Bastion. Brock's Bastion was the fort's most strategic artillery battery. From here, British gunners could train heavy artillery directly into the heart of the American Fort Niagara, which is directly across from us. The bastion also covered the mouth of the Niagara River and was in position for firing on enemy ships attempting to gain access to the river from Lake Ontario. It is named after Major General Sir Isaac Brock, who together with Lieutenant Colonel John McDonnell, who was his aide-de-camp, was buried here after the Battle of Queenston Heights on October 13th, 1812. 12 years later, their bodies were reinterred in a vault in the newly constructed memorial on Queenston Heights, overlooking the historic battlefield, which we will go and visit later. It's a massive, massive monument that you can see everywhere in Niagara Falls.
And to explain who Major General Isaac Brock was, is he was the hero of Upper Canada. From Fort George, when he heard the firing of the Americans invading at Queenston Heights, he jumped on his horse from here, went to Queenston Heights to to attack the enemy. And unfortunately, he was killed at Queenston Heights. But he is a hero of Upper Canada. So this here is Major General Sir Isaac Brock, hero of Upper Canada. Oh, hey, Tan. See that bird? So this here is Blockhouse 2. This downstairs of the blockhouse is where they would house lots of equipment and storage. Upstairs, going this way.
It's a large rectangular building served as sturdy barracks and a storehouse. A blockhouse was really a fort within a fort and became the last line of defense for the garrison.
Cool. And we can't go upstairs from here. But upstairs is where the soldiers would have slept. So this is still Blockhouse 2. Hi, how are you?
Very well. Welcome to the barracks. This room here would have been home to about 50, maybe 60 people in a regiment. There would have been 2 of these rooms, so it would have stretched across both sides of the barracks, as well as it would have been located on the 2nd floor, not the 1st floor historically speaking. Unlike how we have it set up here, it's just that historically this would have been, or the lower floor would have been used for storage instead of soldiers. We suspect that once the war actually got going, though, that changed pretty quickly. They ended up expanding down so that you could store more soldiers inside these barracks, and the supplies would have been moved elsewhere, just to accommodate the increased number of folks that are moving through the area. You can see here that living conditions are pretty bare bones, all things considered. You have 2 soldiers to a bed. Each bed can come apart with the planks that are used for its base, as well as the blankets come off and stuffed into the sack that acts as your mattress, which is effectively just a sack filled with some hay or straw. And this is to try and dissuade you from taking a nap in the middle of the day. The Army had a vested interest in making sure that it kept its soldiers busy at all times, as they were of the mindset that idle soldiers made for big troublemakers, generally speaking. And they were also keen on making sure that they didn't have much free time to themselves, because they wanted to make sure they kept a hold on them for as long as possible. Because while this was, in theory, a volunteer army at the time, that was a very lax policy towards keeping you as a volunteer, and generally speaking, when you signed up, you were in for the long haul, whether you wanted to or not. Soldiers who were lucky enough to have moved over from England alongside some of their families, that is, anywhere from 6 to 12% of the regiment that moved over here was allowed to bring their wives and children with them. Of course, you could only bring 1 child with you, so if you had more than 1, you had to choose which one that was, and generally speaking, that tended to be the youngest. The other children would have been either sent off to family members, enlisted in the employ of a manufacturer or other employer of some sort in order to make a living, because this is the time before child labor laws and such things, as sad as that is. But if you were lucky enough to have brought your family with you, or unlucky enough as the case may be, you might have been afforded a little bit of extra privacy, a little bit of extra luxury. So instead of 1 top bunk or bottom bunk for 2 people, you had the top bunk for mom and dad and the bottom bunk for the kids. And you were also possibly given a little curtain in between you and the rest of the barracks to give you at least some semblance of the illusion of privacy. In reality, this is the room that everybody did everything in. So you ate in here, you slept in here, you cleaned your stuff in here, you went to the bathroom in here, you bathed, albeit once a week. You didn't really bathe any other part of your body than your hands, your wrists, your neck, and your face, any part that's not immediately covered by your general clothing. So it was a room filled with lots of people in a time before deodorant, and every night you got locked in. We didn't have lights like this back then. It would have been candles, if anything, which means that it gets really, really dark in here as well. They don't just set you in here for the night and be done with it. They actually force you to be in here at 9 o'clock, and then they lock the doors to make sure that you don't escape in the middle of the night.
So here we are at the powder magazine This was the only building to survive the bombings from Fort Niagara during the War of 1812.
Constructed in 1796.
1796 this was constructed.
And it makes it one, if not the oldest, surviving military buildings in the province of Ontario.
Nice.
Cool stuff.
And at one time, after the fort was disbanded for years, this building was actually used by a farmer to keep his hay in when there was nothing left of the fort. Let's go inside. And here they have it set up as a powder magazine like it was back in the War of 1812. It's cool. All of these barrels would have been filled with gunpowder for the cannons and the muskets. Probably supplies as well. But yeah, the oldest military building in Ontario. Oh, hey, Dan.
Oh, hey, Stan. There's a small building and nest in there, but
just outside the powder magazine, there's this tunnel. This tunnel takes you over to a small little tower where guards can go in and watch from this tower of any approaching enemy. Apparently this tunnel is haunted.
The purpose of keeping it in place is the weapon's going to come down to the side. The rest of the round is going down the top of the muzzle, as well as the ball at this point historically. You take out a ramrod to make sure it goes properly all the way down to the bottom. And then you take the ramrod out and you're basically ready to fire. However, I cannot stress how important it is that you take the ramrod out after you're done loading it. Don't get me wrong, people have told me before that you could fire this, and sure, I imagine you could. It would fly across the battlefield, shish kebab a few Americans on the other side. I tend to think that this is an awkward weapon, however, the awkward bit being when you have to walk across the battlefield to ask them for it back again. If you manage to fire that off, it's going to be pretty difficult to reload your weapon. So what the Army taught their soldiers was to tap the ramrod with their hand. You made sure it was in place, and you were ready for one shot. Now we're going to hope that this doesn't misfire, otherwise I have to bore you all with the details of that. But there was 3 commands for a British soldier to fire. The first was make ready, set, fire, bang! Alright, give me a second. This is a good sign that the weapon is getting too dirty.
I thought it was louder.
I know me.
Should be an easy thing.
I like the bang.
There it is. Oh, he's reloading. Gunpowder in.
By the time you're done, you're dead.
Take the ramrod out. Shoot it down to the bottom. Pull the ramrod out. Wow, that was quick. Make ready. Load. Fire.
And there we go. I wanted to show you all the misfires so you know I wasn't lying. Now, one thing you probably noticed when I was firing is the smoke. In fact, you can see a lot of it blowing away right now. The smoke being created by these weapons was one of the big reasons why armies of the time period dressed up like this. Now, you could certainly wear camouflage 200 years ago. You could wear a dark green coat. You could wear dark pants. You could paint your face green. You could shove your hat full of leaves and sticks. Make yourself look like a bush or a tree on the battlefield. And you'd fire this weapon exactly one time, and the noise and the smoke created by it would cause any American soldier to say that bush appears to be firing at me, and they would quickly go and investigate. And as a result, camouflage, not a super big idea in the time period. There was no way to really hide the weapon. In fact, most armies of the time period were doing the exact opposite, dressing their soldiers up in really bright, really visible uniforms. The idea behind this was a bit like a reverse camouflage. Instead of trying to hide from the enemy, the goal was to stand out. Because with so much smoke being fired by thousands of muskets, it was going to get really hard to see what you were firing at. At the Battle of Lundy's Lane, one of the deadliest battles of the war, there was so much smoke on the battlefield that British soldiers said the first time they could actually see the Americans they were firing at was at a distance of 10 yards. And so that's roughly where I am to all of you right now. Before they closed into that distance, they could see the muzzle flashes, the fire being created by the musket, but nothing else. And so the tall black hat, bright red coats, shoot me here, X-shaped cross belts across the chest, The goal was to stand out as much as possible. The red wasn't really that important. The British just got it because it was the cheapest cloth available, but everyone was doing a bright color combination. British wear red, Americans wear blue, Russians wear green, Austrians wear white, on and on and on it goes. And so if it gets too smoky, you know who you're firing.
Here is where they cooked for the officers. This was the kitchen. This building outside the kitchen is the officers' quarters and I believe dining hall.
Senior officer's bedroom.
And this is where senior officers dined. How are you?
Hi.
Do you have any questions until all of them here?
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. When they were doing excavation of the fort, they found all this stuff.
Well, apart from the fake coloring.
Oh, yeah. They found stuff buried behind that kitchen.
They found it in a pit behind the officers' quarters.
Wow. Well, this building here at the fort was the jail. So if you got a little rambunctious, too much wine, which seems like there was a lot of,
You shackled with a mouse.
you would go in jail. Look, I'm gonna go in jail. Oh, it's dark in here. Close the door. Close the
If
door.
you put it light, you could commit a crime.
Alright. I'm in jail. Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What's going on?
I am not in jail.
I'm in jail. It's very claustrophobic. This is what it would look like. This here is a prisoner who had way too much to drink. I do not believe these were jails for if they caught prisoners from the American side. This is just for people where you would be punished if you did bad stuff. This is the guardhouse next to the jails where the guards would sleep. As you can see, you just slept side by side, nothing between you. You had your little fire pit, and that was about it. This big patch of grass in the middle probably would have been the parade square where they did their marching and their drills. So here we are at the Niagara Museum. We're gonna walk in here and check out some artifacts. Apparently they have the hat that Sir Isaac Brock was to receive, but he was killed before the hat arrived. They used this hat during his funeral to put on the casket. So let's go check it out. So here is the hat I was talking about. Brock's hat. Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What'd you think of the Niagara Museum?
Oh, it was good. I liked it.
Yeah, I like the Brock hat.
Yes, that's the coolest part of it.
Coolest part. The hat arrived after he died, so they used it for his funeral.
And the Englishman tried it on for fun.
Yeah, people ruined it by trying it on. Men. So here we are at St. Mark's Church. General Brock attended this church when he was in Queenston. This is the old cemetery behind the church. Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What's going on?
It's like a cemetery.
And what's in this cemetery?
Dead bodies.
Dead bodies. Such a nice looking church. The reason why we're going through the cemetery, we're not as morbid as you think. But what we're looking for is the stone. It's a flat stone that the doctors used during the War of 1812 to amputate limbs from soldiers that were hurt during the battle. We will find it. Okay, here is the stone. It's easier to see when it's wet, but this flat stone, if you see all the markings, looks like all slice marks, that would be the axe that was used to cut off limbs of the soldiers to save their life. Apparently they've had mediums come here and do like seances and stuff, and well, according to them, they would feel presence, and they couldn't go near this stone because it was so haunted. But if you believe that mumbo jumbo, to each his own. But yeah, all the cut marks in there, it's so cool. Tam,
Stan,
what you doing?
I'm sitting on Brock's seat.
Brock's seat.
Brock's seat.
What is that?
Pardon my pose.
Oh my God. Early in the War of 1812, Major General Sir Isaac Brock sat on this stone by the edge of the Niagara River as he contemplated American intentions. In November 1893, William Kirby had this rock moved to St. Mark's Cemetery and wrote, "Place it in the old churchyard, this stone in honor of memory of heroic Brock, whose seat it was. His clear eye alone foresaw the way to victory." Honoring the visit of, what's that say?
No, it's
Gur-
upside down.
Of the Guernsey Music Centre Choir, July 13, 2011.
Guernsey is his hometown in England. where he's
Guernsey,
from.
yeah, that's where Brock was born. But the rock she's sitting on is the rock that he sat on, allegedly.
Like this.
Just like that,
Or
to contemplate the War of 1812.
I don't think they like the Canada geese.
No. So here we have mother gooses arguing with Canada geese.
I think the Canada geese are trespassing on their plot of land.
There's going to be a big fight soon.
Look at these guys. They're just hanging out. They don't care. And the babies just sit down.
Oh. Wow.
That's funny. Look at their neck.
Down and up, down and up, down and up, down. That's why they call them Canadian deaf cobra chickens. So just past Fort George, there's this house called the Field House, and it's one of the oldest brick houses in Ontario. It was actually survived the War of 1812, although damaged. It's one of the oldest buildings in the area. Brock actually rented this house for a little while during the War of 1812.
He rented the house as a barracks.
He rented the what?
This red brick classical villa was built by Gilbert Field in 1800. In 1812, General Brock rented the house as a barracks to quarter British regulars and Canadian militia.
So Brock rented this as a barracks. It's one of the few homes in the area to survive the hostilities. Remained in the Field family till about 1925, after which it passed through various hands. Cool. At this point in the Brock saga, this stone here says it's Brown's Point. And apparently this is where Sir Isaac Brock called out on the way to Queenston Heights, October 13th, 1812. Apparently he said, "Push on, York Volunteers." But there's some speculation to that story, because when he was shot and killed at Queenston Heights, before he died, the person that was with him said that he said the same thing. Did he say it twice? He only knows. So we're down in Queenston Heights. Up there you can see the Brock Monument. The Brock Monument is pointing to where the Americans are crossing, which is that way. And what happened was, when Brock got here, he went up to a redan, which there's a cannon just up the hill on the Queenston Heights. And when he was there, he noticed Americans were above him, so they got around when they crossed the Niagara River and were able to get up to the top. So Brock came back down to this area and gathered his troops and then started to charge the Americans. And this is where he was shot and killed. And this is his monument. He was killed in this area. So what this epitaph says, it's hard to read, but it says, "Near this spot, Major General Sir Isaac Brock." It looks like Provisional Lieutenant Governor of Upper Canada fell 13th October 1812 while advancing to repel the advancing enemy. Very hard to read. This here is a monument to Sir Isaac Brock's horse. His name was Alfred. The sign reads, "Early on the morning of October 13th, 1812, after galloping 7 miles from Fort George, General Brock tethered his Ouray horse Alfred here in the village of Queenston in order to lead a charge on foot to repel the invading enemy. Brock was killed leading the attack. Colonel MacDonald, which is his aide-de-camp, then took command until General Chaffee could arrive from Fort George with reinforcements. MacDonald rode Alfred to lead another charge. He was mortally wounded and Alfred was killed. Part of the price of saving Canada on that fateful day. They also serve who only stand and wait." So there's a lot of discrepancies on that. They say he jumped on his horse and then the horse was killed, but then others say they don't know what happened to Alfred after Brock tied him up. So who knows? So here we are at the native statues to commemorate the War of 1812. The natives helped the Canadian side in defeating the Americans at most battles. Who's this person? Here's another native. Oh, hey Tam.
Hey, Sam.
What's going on?
Nothing. My foot is wet.
Tam decided to step into the Niagara River with one foot. He got it nice and wet. Yeah. Hello, Mr. Squirrel. Hello. Hello, Mr. Squirrel. Oh, he's coming. So here we are at the Brock Monument. Inside this monument lies the body of Major General Sir Isaac Brock and Lieutenant Colonel John McDonnell, who was Brock's aide de camp. Right in that door would be the bodies of these heroes. And there's the tower, and all the way at the top of the tower, you got Brock. And what he's doing is he's pointing. And where is he pointing, you might ask? He's pointing to where the Americans are coming up. They made this monument after Brock's death in 1812. But this isn't the first monument, this is the second monument. First monument, somebody put a bomb in there and blew half of it up. They had to take the bodies out, bury them into another cemetery while they rebuilt the monument. I believe it's 200 feet tall. I'm just guessing, but it's taller than the actual first monument. So once the new monument was built, they had another funeral procession for Brock and McDonnell. So that would have been 2 times. First time they were buried was at Fort George from 1812 to 1824, I think. And then they were dug up, funeral procession, come here, laid to rest in the first monument. Then when the first monument got blown up, took them out, buried them in a cemetery near a church back in Niagara on the Lake. And then when they finished the second monument, they dug them up again, did another funeral procession, and reburied them here. After Brock's death during the battle, Sir Roger Hale Sheafy, who was a major general, assumed command and led a successful attack, which dislodged an invading American force from Queenston Heights. So when you're at the Brock Monument, way up there, there's a trail that takes you down all around, and it has history points. This here, this cannon, is the actual cannon from the War of 1812, still sitting here, facing the Niagara River, shooting at the Americans. Sir Isaac Brock actually came to this cannon and was talking with the troops that were here when the Americans made a bold dash up the other side and actually made it above them. Then Brock and the troops here all fled into Queenston Heights, the town, where Brock led the charge towards the Americans, where he was fatally wounded. Oh, hey, Tam.
Hey, Sam.
What are you taking a picture of?
You.
Ah. So here we are at the Laura Ingersoll Secord home, 1775 to 1868. For those of you who don't know Laura Secord, she is not the chocolate person. The store Laura Secord Chocolates has nothing to do with her. They just named their store after her. The Laura Secord is a heroine of the War of 1812. She set out on an arduous 19-mile journey to warn the local British commander, Lieutenant James Fitzgibbon, of an impending attack. The reason why she did this is because when the Americans were here in Queenston Heights, one of the officers was in Laura Secord's home, and she overheard them talking about an impending attack at Beaver Dams. So she went 19 miles to Beaver Dams to warn them of the impending attack. And this is why the Canadians won that part of the war, because they were prepared. The funny thing about Laura Secord is that she was an American. And when she came over here with her father in 1795, she settled in this area, right in this home. And again, Laura Secord has nothing to do with Laura Secord chocolates. Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What are you doing?
We're in Chippewa, near Niagara on the Lake.
My baby was a Chippewa.
We are at Laura Secord's second home. It was built in 1837. She moved in with her husband and 5 children around 1841-ish.
Ish. And then what happened?
She died in this house. And then she's buried in Drummond Hill Cemetery, right beside her husband, as it should be.
Oh, and when did she die? 27 years later. 1868. Let's go take a look at the house. This is the house. Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What you doing?
We're going to go see Laura Secord's house. Start again, please.
Oh, hey, Tam.
Oh, hey, Stan.
What you doing?
We are going to go check out Laura Secord's home.
Her other
in
home.
Chippewa, her other home.
Yes. When did she move here?
1837? I don't know.